The number one thing that is to our success is the day I realized there's no relationship between what something costs and what it's worth. Okay? That is the number one business thing I learned. And the number one cultural thing I learned is everybody that works for me is somebody's precious child that's been placed in my care. Those are the two primary learnings from a business strategy standpoint and a cultural standpoint.
Whether it's a novelty work cup, treasured office plant, or company toy mascot, whatever you bring to work to help you be you, Workplace celebrates it. Their easy-to-use features make work feel more familiar, as well as helping everyone work together in new ways. Visit workplace.com/human to discover more. Workplace from Meta. Make your place of work a great place to work.
So for those who are watching, and if you're not familiar with Bob Chapman is the CEO of Barry-Wehmiller. I think you're around 12,000 employees now, right, Bob?
Yes. About $3 billion in revenue, 12,000 employees.
Very cool. So a manufacturing company, and I also heard that you recently got mentioned in an Inc. article as the number 3 CEO in the world. Congratulations.
Good news, my son told me, Dad, there's still room for improvement. You're only number 3.
I love that. Yeah, you still got two people to jump over to get. Yeah. So we've done a couple of podcasts together. We've had many conversations in the past. But this is kind of different because I wanted to really just focus on you and your insights and your approach to leadership. And I know you've been really big on this concept of truly human leadership. So can you talk a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, it was really I've been in business for 50 years. The first half of my career with a very traditional business education, accounting, MBA, was just kind of playing the game according to what I found, what I studied, what I found. And it was a series of transformation. And I was successful in that environment. So the company was doing well. It wasn't some shock that caused me to come to this human leadership. But starting in 1997, I had 3 revelations that awakened my senses to a higher calling in business. Or why can't business be the most powerful force for good in the world if we simply cared about the people we had the privilege of leading? Simon Sinek, we called it initially people-centric leadership focused on people. Simon Sinek came in, became very close to our message, loved our message, and said, Bob, this is not people-centered. This is truly human leadership. This is the way we are intended to treat people we have the privilege of leading. So it went from people-centric leadership to truly human leadership, which means looking at the people in your span of care as somebody's precious child, not as an engineer, an accountant, a receptionist, or a field lineman or something, not describing people by functions, but looking at people, regardless of the role they play in the company, as somebody's precious child, which is the most transformative aspect of from management to leadership. Because remember, the word management means, in my view, the manipulation of others for your success. And leadership means the stewardship of the lives entrusted to you.
Oh, I remember when we did podcasts together, and I think I mentioned the word like manager or management, and you're like, Jacob, I got to stop you right there. We don't use that word here.
Yeah, it's because the words we use affect our behavior, okay? Words affect behavior. When we call managers, bosses, and supervisors, first of all, you can't manage anybody. And second of all, nobody wants to be managed. Nobody wants a boss, and nobody wants to be supervised. So, I mean, we use words that kind of create behavior that's just instead of leaders, coaches, and mentors.
So you said there were some transformative events that happened. I think you mentioned 1997. So what happened? What got you to this revelation? Because, a lot of people who are going to be watching this, they might have MBAs where they're taught management and accounting and, different approaches to leadership. And it's very academic. And it seemed like you were doing very well in that area. So what made you change?
Well, I bought a company in South Carolina in 1997. It was March of 1997. I flew down there to be there the very first day. It was a big acquisition. I mean, it was a $50 50-some million dollar company that for us was that I paid about 24 million for. So it was a big acquisition for me. It's serious. Flew down to be there the first day, walked in to have a cup of coffee before the office opened. Nobody knew me. I didn't know them. So I just kind of stood there, had a cup of coffee, and I just, out of curiosity, watched behavior. And people were talking about March Madness, which college basketball teams won, how much money they won, where they were in the pool. They're having fun. The closer it got to 8 o'clock, you could just see the fun go out of their body as they had to go to work. Now, I don't remember thinking this at the time, but I know what my mind was processing is, why can't work be fun? Okay, why do we prepare ourselves for a career that is defined by work? And we can hardly wait. That we have TGIF. Thank God it's Friday to get that out of this place. So I began trying some things that aligned with value creation and fun, and we saw profound changes in behavior. A couple of years later, I was at a church service, and my mentor was director of our church. And at the end of the service, I looked at my wife and I said, Cynthia, Ed has only got us for 1 hour a week. We have people for 40 hours a week. We are 40 times more powerful in the church to inspire people to live lives of meaning and purpose. As I walked out of the church that day, I said, business could be the most powerful force for good in the world if we simply cared about the people we had the privilege of leading. Finally, the most momentous, the culmination of my transformation was at a wedding. And a friend of mine was walking his daughter down the aisle, and everybody's oohing and ahhing how precious she looked, how proud the father was. Got up to the altar and said, I'm going to give my daughter to this young man to be wed. And he sat down next to his wife, and they hugged each other as the ceremony continued. And I said to myself, having walked two of my precious daughters down the aisle, that's not what that father wanted to say. That's what he was told to say. What he wanted to say is, look at young man. My mother and I brought this precious young lady into this world. We've given her all the love and care we can possibly give her so she can be who she's intended to be. And we expect you, young man, through your marriage, as she will be with you, that you two will allow each other to live lives of meaning and purpose and be who you're intended to be. Do you understand that, young man? That's what every father wants to say if he gives his daughter away to a young man. And all of a sudden, my mind, when I went from that, is, oh my God, all 12,000 people that work for us around the world are somebody's precious child, just like that young lady and young man. Not just a ceremony, when they walk in our building every day. And the parents of the people who work for us surely brought these kids into this world so they could live lives of meaning and purpose. And so that day, I stopped thinking of people as functions, as engineers, accountants, receptionists, production workers, hourly workers, salary workers. And I started seeing people as somebody's precious child whose life was placed in my care. And the way I embrace that responsibility would profoundly affect that life. And so that was the culmination of the three.
How does that manifest inside of Barry-Wehmiller? So I'm sure a lot of people would say they love the concept of truly human leadership. How does it actually come to life inside of Barry-Wehmiller? So if you have any stories or examples, those are great.
Well, the best thing I would say to you is that when we began this journey, when we had these series of revelations, we were having a dinner. We flew out to California to interview a guy who wrote a book, True to Your Roots. It was a book about leadership. We went out to Napa Valley to interview this gentleman running a vineyard. And we were having a dinner the night before, and a young man had just joined our team, and he asked me a question nobody would ask me. He knew me. He said, Bob, what's your greatest fear? Now, I'm an eternal optimist, and I never talk about my fears. But I thought for a minute, and I said, my greatest fear is that we've been given a gift that could profoundly change the world, and it would die with me. We got up the next morning after the dinner, and I looked at this young man. I said, okay, you surfaced the fear I didn't even know I had. What are we going to do? And I said, what do great religions do to survive their original founder, as they articulate their beliefs, and then they tell stories that affirm their belief with disciples. So I said, we got to create disciples who believe this as much as I do. And how are we going to create disciples? Well, we started creating a university to give people a chance to become disciples. So that was the beginning. So what we did was, and I would say to your audience, you can ask people to care about others. You can ask them and they'll say, sure, I agree. But what they don't know is they don't know how to care. So that's things we've learned. So when we because we couldn't send people back to graduate school to learn how to care because we teach management classes, okay, we started with a clean sheet of paper. And we started creating, and one of our team members, David Vandermolen, said, well, if we're going to teach them to be leaders, we need to teach them how to listen. I said, why do we need to teach adults how to listen? We know how to listen. We need to teach them how to listen. I said, okay. So the team developed a 3-day intense class on listening, empathetic listening. And I happened to be in Minneapolis a few weeks later, and a young lady came up to me and said, Mr. Chapman, I just took that university class that you offered on listening. I said, great, what was it like? And she said, it changed my life. It changed your life? And she said, yes, I now know how to raise my 2-year-old child. So my senses exploded.
Wait, she said what?
I now know how to raise my 2-year-old child. Okay?
Oh, wow, okay.
Because listening is not just at work, it's in every part of your life.
Yeah.
Not being quick to talk, but being quick to listen and understand. And so that began the journey. And then we started teaching recognition and celebration, how to let people know they matter. That's another class. We have a culture of service, which is seizing the opportunity to serve others. So a very unique approach to leadership, not management. Okay, so I would say to you, when people, we had no idea that we're developing something that the world would awaken to, as it has in the last 10 years. And so it was Simon Sinek who first came in and sat down with some of our people because he had heard about it, but he didn't believe it. So he was the first from the outside that came in, and he sat down and talked to our people for 2 days. And he said, I am no longer a nutty idealist. I have just seen what I dream of. I dream of a world where you tap anybody in the shoulder in any city in the country and say, do you like your job? And they'd say, no, I don't like my job. I love my job. That's Simon's dream, okay? And so then Amy Cuddy, Bill Urey, Raj Sisodio, I mean, we started getting McKinsey, Harvard, unbelievable thinkers from around the world coming in to see our culture. And every single person said, I've never seen anything like this. And when people would sit down with our team members, it wasn't talking to me. Grown men and women would get emotional just saying what it feels like to be cared for. Okay?
Yeah, which is fantastic.
And again, we're talking about creating economic value and human value in harmony. Okay, we're a nonprofit organization. Our share price has gone up 14% a year for 25 years in a row. Okay, we are a very unique value-creating organization, but our focus is our people. I was interviewed by Washington University organizational development professors for an hour and a half not too long ago, a couple of years ago. At the end of the interview, they said, Mr. Chapman, you're the first CEO we've ever interviewed that didn't talk about the product. And I said, we've been talking about the product for the last hour and a half. It's our people. I want to go to my grave proud of the machinery we build. We build big capital equipment. I'll go to my grave proud of the people who built that machinery. So focus on people.
What about some leaders out there? Because you're the CEO, so they might say, oh, Bob's the CEO. He has a lot of power to change the company because he's the CEO. But I'm a mid-level leader in my company, and I believe in a lot of the things that Bob says, but those around me don't believe in it. It's not talked about here. My executives don't care about it. So what can I do? Do you have any advice or suggestions?
So I was speaking to a global group of operational executives for a $20 billion division of a bigger public company. This is a few years ago. And I gave my speech, which your listeners understand. At the end of it, an executive raised his hand. I said, Mr. Chapman, what if corporate doesn't endorse this? Okay, same question. And first time I'd had that question, and I thought for a minute, and I thought of the Wizard of Oz. I think I saw the Wizard of Oz one time in my life, but for some reason I thought of the story of Dorothy, the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, and the Lion. And I said, you remind me of Dorothy and the Tin Man, seeking something that you don't think you have, okay? Because when Dorothy and the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, and the Lion got to the wizard, he said to them, when it was revealed, he was just an elegant old gentleman, a wise gentleman, said, you have what you need. Use what gifts you have. And so I said, what do you need from corporate? You don't need a requisition for funding, okay? You don't need a memo that we're going to care about people. You just need to begin to embrace these practices and live these and look at the people in your span of care. That's how it begins. And you got to play it smart. You got to play it within the group, the company, the philosophies you have. But I mean, I even had a CEO of a major world corporation say to me, who heard me speak and asked me to come speak to his team, how should I handle my board of directors? So even the chairman wasn't sure how to handle, because this is a language that boards don't speak, okay? And I said, very carefully, you got to be very careful, because you don't want to say, oh, all of a sudden we're going to do these things. You need to introduce this in thoughtful ways and start showing people, because remember, 3 out of 4 people in this country are disengaged in what they're doing, according to Gallup. If you had a machine tools in your plant or some other operation in your plant that was, only 25% productive, you'd address it, okay? People are not sharing their gifts out there, doing what they need to do to get by, okay? So I just said to them, just go out and embrace these practices thoughtfully and understand the audience isn't going to understand it, but you're going to do it in thoughtful ways. And that's the advice, because many people who hear me speak are in that exact same situation. You can begin by listening. The most powerful thing we teach is how to listen to people, okay? And how to let them know they matter. And you can do that without, any major disruption. You can begin listening to people through empathetic listening. It is a skill. We teach it at our company. We teach it in our leadership institute. It's something I have a nonprofit that we teach it around the country. So that's what I would say to anybody. What you can begin by thinking about your situation and beginning to apply it and looking at the people. It begins by very simple, looking at the people you have the privilege of leading as somebody's precious child, not as an engineer, a receptionist, or a clerk.
Whatever you bring to work to help you be you, Workplace from Meta celebrates it. Their familiar features help everyone work together in new ways. To make your place of work a great place to work, visit workplace.com/human. That's workplace.com/human.
How do you spend your day? So a lot of people are always fascinated. How do leaders spend their day? What do they do? What do they focus on? What do they eat? What do they read? What is a day in the life of Bob like?
Well, it depends on the evolution of your company. In my early days, I spent my entire day intensely focused on trying to change this 100-year-old company into creating a future. I would say the primary responsibility of a leader is to give those people in your care a grounded sense of hope for a future. Okay, now I'm going to go on, and Jim Collins is Good to Great. He talks about the need to get the right people on the bus, okay? Mm-hmm. Say to you, I think that's, I don't want to disagree with it, but I'd say it differently. You need to build a safe bus, okay? So every leader that listens to this webinar, this podcast, has got to think about your business model. I say that bus is every leader's got to build a safe bus, which is your business model. And then you need drivers who can drive it safely and know where they're going. And then anybody that gets on the bus is going to do fine. So the responsibility of the leader is to constantly stand back and say, is my business model safe for the people who've invested in me, their time, my team members, our investors, our bankers? Have I got a robust business model? Because I will tell you, if you don't have a safe bus, you're going to hurt people, okay? Yeah. Business model. And, we've seen many business models be destroyed by changing the economy, changes in technology. So one of the biggest words I use in the design of our business model is the word balance. We are in a balance of industries, products, technologies, countries, so that any one change in any one part is not going to hurt the whole company. So designing the business model is my first responsibility. And then finding drivers who I can share that vision of that safe bus, and then put them in the driver's seat so they can take the people they have the privilege of leaving to a good place. That is our responsibility as leaders. If we did that and sent people home each day feeling valued, we'd have a dramatically more caring world than we have today.
So as far as how it manifests into the day-to-day aspect of your job, does that mean that you just spend all your time with people, checking in with people, lots of meetings, or how do you actually spend?
I would say to you, when I began I'm an accountant by training. I worked at Pricewaterhouse, so I spent a lot of time analyzing numbers. But I would say to you, the numbers are really the output of a good business strategy, and then people staffing that strategy with people who can embrace it. We're now, I've been at this 50 years. I've made a lot of mistakes in that period of time. But today I'm really focused on the following. Where are you going? Why do you want to go there? And when you get there, why will you have taken your people to a good place? Okay. That is the primary question. And I don't see many people embracing that. The kind of this year's budget, 3-year plan. I believe strategy, just like a sporting team. If you've got the right play patterns and you understand who you're playing against, and you then execute that play pattern well, but it's not just going out and playing your position well. It's going out and playing the game pattern well that's particularly designed against the team you're going to, where it's either good offense, good defense, throwing a passing game or a running game. So I think most important thing is, what is your business model, and why does it give those people who place their care in you a good future? And if you don't have a good business model, you're eventually going to crash, okay, or dramatically subperform and hurt the people you've invited to the company. So the most important thing an executive can do is understand the business model and risk and exposures of it, so you can try and design it as safe as you can for people who place their trust in you.
What are the biggest mistakes that you see leaders making, whether they're seasoned leaders or new leaders?
I would say the biggest mistake that I see people make is they're too focused on the numbers and not enough on the strategy. To me, the numbers are output of the strategy, and I don't find enough people that think about where they're going and why they want to go there, and understanding the competitive landscape, the market dynamics, the customer base. Our company's acquired 115 companies in the last 30 years. And we've grown our share price by 14% a year compounded that period of time. So we must have figured out something. And so the biggest thing I find when I acquire other companies is people haven't thought. They just don't think deeply enough about the strategy, the play patterns, the game they're going to play, the people they're competing against, and in the long term, how to shape the company. I started in 1975 when my dad died, with a very old historic business, marginally profitable, marginally financeable, and the company kept trying to play the same game pattern it played for 100 years, and it was never going to win. And the biggest decision I made is the day that I said, I'm proud of our history, but our history doesn't give us a future. We got to reshape the future of our company. That is our responsibility as leaders, whether you're leaders of the country, leaders of a business, leaders of a family, is to look out on the broader horizon so you know where you're going. Okay, and why you want to go there, and why, so I don't see enough focus on, where you're going and how to get there, and because, we made money, we did this, and I think strategy is the most unique part of sports and business. Okay, my youngest son, who was a star baseball, football, basketball player in high school, and I said, Kyle, business is just like a sport. You got offense, defense, you got play patterns, and you got a scoreboard. You just don't get hurt as much. Okay, and you can play it in a wheelchair. So I'd say to you, business is a lot of fun. It's challenging, but I think the key is what is the value creating strategy that gives your people a grounded sense of hope for the future?
What do you see that separates good leaders? I'm sure you have a lot of good leaders at Barry-Wehmiller from really great leaders, those who go above and beyond and stand out. What's the small percentage that separates those two leaders?
Well, I saw that question you asked, and the difference between good and great. Part of it has to do with the experiences. As I contrast some of our leaders have grown up in what I call normal companies, where making $1 every year was kind of the focus in business. They didn't think deeply. And then some of our people have come up through an organization that had really good skill sets. And so it's kind of like they developed their graduate post-education play patterns, and they just have a sense of the doable. It's just the elegance upon which they can talk about operations, about R&D, about selling strategy. That's the greatest leaders just have this kind of natural sense for all the aspects of the business, not just, and they've been with really good companies, not necessarily good cultures. I didn't say good cultures. And when you take, in our recent experience, when we bring some people in who've had some great experience with really well-run companies, they just come in and do things naturally that we thought we had to train people to do. So I think the difference between good and great is the experience and exposure you've had after your education, where you learn how to, put in practice the full breadth of business, not just engineering or selling or finance. But you see how all these things come together and create
big picture. Well, I know we only have a couple minutes left, so maybe just 2 more questions for you. You said you made a lot of mistakes over the years. How do you approach mistakes when you make them? Do you beat yourself up over it, or what do you do when something bad happens?
Well, again, in 1975, when my dad died, my first 6 months were just keeping the company alive because it was financially very fragile. But all of a sudden, I decided I had all these ideas to create a good future, and I started developing solar energy systems for the brewing industry. I started developing electronic inspection systems, filling systems, and our company was growing naturally. And everything I touched seemed to turn to gold. But what I was doing though was I was asking people who had been in a business for decades, kind of knew one play pattern, to all of a sudden embrace these new things. And I got way out over my ski tips. And the market, we're dealing with Miller Brewing Company, Philip Morris, and Anheuser-Busch, and Carlsberg Brewery in Denmark, and Philip Morris. I was dealing with really smart people, but I over-assessed our ability to transform, and I made that mistake. And we ended up in each one of those major, unbelievable initiatives falling short of realizing our expectation. And I hadn't kept myself financially grounded. I was so excited to all of a sudden be growing in all these new fields that I didn't have my financial disciplines as they need to be. My bankers were so supportive of my growth. And then when we hit some roadblocks, they were the first ones to bail. The first ones to encourage me and the first ones to bail. And I realized that you've always got to keep yourself, financially solid to pursue growth. So I grew without financial disciplines. I didn't beat myself up. I'm an eternal optimist. I get up every day with a very positive attitude. I'll give you an example. We were in the midst, the banks had pulled on us. It was probably February of 1984. I flew in the people, our leaders from England, so I was having a Saturday morning meeting. This is just kind of, so we're hour to hour paying bills. I guess somebody could have taken us in bankruptcy any day. Team came over from England. I said, well, we'll meet on Saturday morning. So we're in our boardroom on Saturday morning. I said, well, why don't we get a cup of coffee before we start? And my VP of Finance says, Bob, I forgot to tell you, they repossessed our coffee makers last week. We hadn't paid them in 6 months. Now
so they actually took your coffee makers away?
Right. So that's got to be a pretty low point when your coffee makers get repossessed. Okay.
Jeez.
Okay. And my reaction, so this is my answer. My reaction was, I never really liked that coffee. Why don't I run out and buy you guys a cup of coffee and I'll be right back. It didn't even faze me. I took a positive approach. My family would tell you I never brought home, I don't remember ever worrying. I should have. We were on the edge of bankruptcy for 9 months, barely got refinanced, and I had no experience in this. So I believe that people look for leaders who have a grounded sense of hope. I had a grounded sense of hope, not much chance of success, but a grounded sense of hope. I never gave up hope, and the people around me stuck with me, and we made it through to become, if you will, today, Barry-Wehmiller has talked about around the world because of our culture today. And so, and it's because, honestly, the skill I have is, I'm sure if we took an intelligence test, I would be very average. But what I would say I have is common sense and creativity. I see value where other people don't see it because things are kind of simple to me. The cultural journey we're on is amazing, how it's impressed people at Harvard, McKinsey, and Stanford. And it came from a pretty simple mind, but they're just simple thoughts. Everybody's somebody's precious child. Is not some deep psychological theory, okay? And capturing moments of value. So anyway, I would say to you that leaders need, I personally believe leaders need to be optimists, okay? Grounded optimists, that people can put their faith in you and you won't let them down. I think that's important for leaders.
And maybe a very last question for you. So you've been a leader, you mentioned, for many, many decades.
Yeah.
From all of your years of leading, what would you say your best piece of advice or your greatest learnings from your career has been?
Well, I speak at Washington University's MBA, second year MBA every year. This is the one thing I tell them. I've been kind of speaking for years. Harvard did a case study on Barry-Wehmiller in the early 90s. So I've been speaking in colleges. The number one thing, well, there's two things, one from a business and one from a culture. The number one thing that is to our success is the day I realized there's no relationship between what something costs and what it's worth, okay? That is the number one business thing I learned. And the number one cultural thing I learned is everybody that works for me is somebody's precious child that's been placed in my care. Those are the two primary learnings from a business strategy standpoint and a cultural standpoint.
I love it. Those are great pieces of advice. Well, Bob, thank you so much for sharing your insights and words of wisdom with me. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Thanks again. I appreciate you joining us in the journey, helping to share the message.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks again for tuning into the show, and don't forget to go to 6leadershiptrends.com to grab a copy of my brand new PDF, which is going to walk you through the 6 trends that are shaping leadership and what it means to be a leader. And it will also give you action items for what you should be doing for each one of these 6 trends to adapt and evolve so that you can be a better leader in the future of work. Again, that is 6leadershiptrends.com. You can either spell out the number 6 in the URL or just use the number 6 in the URL. They will both take you to the same place. Thanks again for tuning in.